So let's start with our session of today. Greetings to the viewers. Welcome to the session of by Tilak Toма Foundation on challenges to sustainable peace in South Asia. I am Pauline Bhattacharya, the business manager of Tilak Toma Foundation, and the speakers for today is Dr. Aslam Khan, associate professor in the Department of Gandhian and Peace Studies, and Mahatma Gandhi Central University. He has also served as a professor and dean at York State University. He has also worked as a associate professor and in the Department of Political Science and International Studies in Ethiopia. Dr. Khan has also served as a visiting fellow at University of Western Australia, Perth. Dr. Khan is a recipient of the National Excellence Award in Education by the World Book of Records, UK. Our session for today covers South Asia. South Asia has been an area of occasional prone to conflict and violence due to the several reasons, and with terrorism being a major one. There has also been internal conflict in countries like Sri Lanka and Nepal. The South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, had formed in 1985 to develop cooperation among the South Asian countries, but failed to sustain the peace and deliver its duties. The conflict between India and Pakistan, two largest countries in South Asia, has negatively impacted the proper working of the regional organization. We hope to get an idea about the major challenges in the path to sustainability in South Asia from Dr. Aslam Khan. I would now like to hear from Dr. Aslam Khan. Over to Dr. Aslam Khan.
Thank you very much, Palome. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you very much for providing me the opportunity. So the talk today is about the challenges to sustainable peace in South Asia. So before going to the perspective of peace, we must also look the challenges that South Asia is having in the present time or since the past time. So let's have an overview of South Asia. If we are talking geographically, South Asia comprises the Indian subcontinent and its immediate surrounds, like based on the membership of the SAARC, the regional organization that represents South Asian nations that comprise in an alphabetical order. I am telling you: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. And all these South Asian nations have connections with neighboring regions also, like Afghanistan links Central Asia and Southwest Asia. Plus, it has a connection with Northeast Asia via short border with China. India, Nepal, and Bhutan have connections with Northeast Asia by virtue of their common border with Chinese-controlled Tibet. Maldives is actually located in the Indian Ocean, and similarly Sri Lanka is located in the Indian Ocean, although the submerged Adams Bridge physically linked this island to the Indian subcontinent. And India and Bangladesh have connections with Southeast Asia as a result of their land borders with Myanmar. Because of Andaman and Nicobar, India is well close to Southeast Asia also. And India is also the largest and most vibrant and economically strong nation of South Asia. Furthermore, India's economy is growing strongly. Therefore, India dominates the South Asia region and its component nations also. India's situation is enhanced by a significant geostrategic advantage. India is at the center of South Asia, with Indian land and maritime borders separating all South Asian nations from each other, except from Afghanistan and Pakistan. The geostrategic reality means that South Asia is essentially India-locked. for non-Indians to access each other, they must either cross Indian territory or meet in third locations away from the South Asia. So the situations and circumstances is difficult for landlocked nations like Afghanistan, Bhutan and Nepal, which partially explain the often weak Afghanistan-Pakistan relationship, and why Afghanistan is politically closer to India than Pakistan. This is the one reason, the close proximity. So since Paulomi already mentioned about the SAARC, so SAARC is a platform of the regional integration in South Asia. It was established in 1985, but it is largely ineffectual, advancing the region politically or economically. Despite the existence of South Asia preferential trading arrangement and the South Asian free trade area, South Asian countries enjoy little interconnectivity or inter-regional trade. Indeed, interregional trade is less than 2% of GDP compared to the more than 20% of the East Asia we are going to compare. The reason is well known to us that Indo-Pak hostility and the state-sponsored terrorism is the main cause for that matter. Now, since we are talking the what kind of the problems or the hostilities South Asian nations has gone through, so I'm just going to the background one by one. That India and Pakistan, they have already fought 4 wars in 1948, 65, 71, 1999 in Kargil and other limited aggressions time and again. And both nations maintain massive militaries that patrol the line of control that divides Jammu and Kashmir and serve on the Siachen Glacier, the highest and most inhospitable battlefield in the world in the northeast area of the disputed former princely state. Then India and China, when we are talking of South Asia, we cannot ignore China. So India and China fought a war in 1962 despite the Panchsheel agreement. Then in 1971 again, East Pakistan was created as Bangladesh by the support of Indian Army. This involved the atrocities and high level of casualties also. Then if we are talking of Afghanistan, then since 1979, Afghanistan has endured turmoil with Soviet forces being present from 1979 to 89, followed by the brutal civil war, and later Taliban ruled until 2001. Then military intervention by the American-led International Security Assistance Forces from 2001 to 14. Then when we come to the Nepal, Nepal was having a Maoist uprising from 1996 to 2006. Then when you are coming to the Sri Lanka, in 2009, Sri Lanka finally defeated separatist group Tamil Tigers, that were the very dominant group in the Sri Lanka earlier. Then Maoism, Naxalites in eastern parts of India in 2009. It was regarded as India's greatest internal security threat. So these are some of the background I mentioned. And since I am going forward, the South Asia is also considered as a nuclear flashpoint. So where an incident could escalate military to the point of nuclear weapon being used in a conflict. And recent conflict or recent kind of tensions with Pakistan after Pulwama, it was a kind of the nuclear threat exchange between India and Pakistan. And since India and Pakistan both are having the nuclear capabilities, comprising respectively 100 to 150 nuclear weapons each. These weapons are now deliverable by long-range ballistic missiles for India or medium-range ballistic missile for Pakistan, which is seeking to develop or acquire a long-range ballistic missile capability in the present time. And both nations are seeking to acquire second strike capabilities, including development of the nuclear-powered or nuclear-armed submarines equipped with the ballistic missiles. Then India needs this capability to defend against China too. Pakistan needed to defend against India. While India is essentially developing its second strike capability indigenously, China is assisting Pakistan. So these are the calculus that they want the protection against China, India wants protection against China, Pakistan wants protection against India. So what are the threat and challenges? Since we all know that South Asia is the home of nearly 1/3 global population, near about 1.9 billion, faces immense challenges due to the several sectors. And I will also come later on that how the nature of the state or the state structure is being managed in South Asia. Here I need to mention Stephen Walt and Michael Sheehan. They argue that the perception of threat is necessary and can arise from one or more of any of the following. That can be geographical proximity, that can be territorial dispute, that can be ideological hostility, then it can be a perceived aggressive attention also. So these kind of the things that can culminate into a threat. So the long and persistent influence of the external actors, since we all know that before that British were ruling this region, and because all these kind of the disputes we are seeing in the modern time, whether it is a dispute with the Nepal in Kalapani, or it is a dispute with the China, these all are the treaties that were signed during the British period. And so external intervention is very much there. The external powers in decision making process we can witness right from the beginning, and the lack of the fundamental necessities has increased the level of frustration and the sense of deprivation among the people, which provides a fertile ground for the prospect of the conflict. We can give the example of the Naxalism, Maoism, whatever these groups are emerged out of that. Then the region is often labeled as one of the most dangerous regions on the earth due to the growing intolerance, extremism, terrorism, insurgencies, and rise of various nuclear powers in South Asia. So what are the common threat to peace here? Despite South Asia having achieved relative progress, multiple factors such as religious extremism, high level of corruption, inequitable development, and mutual distrust, among others, have led to the South Asia being termed as the most volatile region in the world. So the main common threat to peace are terrorism, religious extremism, mutual distrust, corruption, poverty, inequitable development, and external intervention are the major challenges or the threat to the sustainable peace in South Asia. And the existence of the various political systems, that is very important point, that the existence of the various political systems, including monarchy, we have witnessed in Nepal, in Bhutan. We are having the military kind of state like Pakistan. There is a civilian military ups and down there. Then we have seen the democracy in the case of India. These have been the reason for various threat to the South Asian peace also, because sometimes a military orientation is different from the civilian government and vice versa. So the nature and strength of the state also contributed to the cause, as we have weak state in South Asia, we have failed state in South Asia, we have a strong state in South Asia, and there had been a problem of convergence among them. So this is the main crux of the problem. So the when we are taking an overview of the South Asian state, that I was mentioning about the failed state, weak state, strong state. So what is the definition of a weak state? A weak state is characterized by its weak level of state capacity to develop and implement policies in order to provide collective goods like security and welfare to its citizens in a legitimate and effective manner, not confined by internal and external actors. So a state is not just a security provider, but should function in a way to provide welfare as well. So the major cause of weakening of state surround against several factors such as lack of infrastructure. So these are the factors of the weakening of the state, like lack of infrastructure, lack of security, undemocratic political culture, and lack of participation. So when in terms of the state capacity, if we are talking of the failed state, for instance, then a failed state, we can take Afghanistan in this category. A failed state is one that has failed in all crucial aspects, predominantly security and legitimacy, and not having full control over its territory. Because you know, in Afghanistan, some part was controlled by Taliban, some was government recognized by America and allies. So Afghanistan fully come in this category, and a failed state is heavily reliant on external support or its survival. So now I am coming to the weak and fragile state. When we are talking of a fragile state or weak state, we can easily name Pakistan in this category. A weak state is a legitimate state providing reasonable levels of welfare and security, but having substantial coercive power and thereby being able to suppress internal dissidents for a short time, but not eternally pointing out Pakistan, Nepal and Sri Lanka as the main nation state which fall into this category, because monarchy suppressed the people's movement in Nepal. Then we can take the example of Pakistan, that's different groups or different sectors, they are not in conformity with the government policies, so fights are going on like Balochistan. We can take an example of Balochistan and all. Now I am coming to the strong or powerful state. The strong state as being strong in various aspects, largely control and legitimacy, whereas being weak is some other aspect, primarily welfare and internal security. Then India as being the likely candidate satisfying these conditions of the strong state, because India is having a strong economy, a strong polity, a strong defense policy, strong military. So we can consider India as a strong state in South Asia. Now there are some fundamental linkages between state capacity and security, because state capacity and security are interlinked. These things are prevalent in South Asia, starting with the first one, which state that weak state tend to manage internal security ineffectively and thereby have the tendency to use their force to suppress internal dissidents, and the kind of suppression lead to the secessionist group operating from home soil, like I gave the example of Naxals and all. So another linkage that arises in weak state is that the fondness for externalization of domestic conflict to strengthen domestic credibility, because most of the domestic issue has been internationalized in South Asia. And the stronger states, like weak states, always has been the tendency. The stronger states, like weak states, as they see fertile ground to operate and pursue their own national interests with them. So now I am coming to the theoretical discourse of this. If we apply some theory on the South Asian peace and security situation, then the prevalent theory of the IR and their relevance in South Asian regional framework are, it can be realism, liberalism, neo-realism, that anarchy can come into it, neoliberalism, constructivism. So now here I will quote here Kenneth Walsh. I am mentioning Kenneth Walsh. He claimed that this anarchical international system is a power that shapes the state behavior. What shapes state behavior? Anarchical international system, as the structure of the anarchic system compels state to adapt certain policies, because some condition state comes, then they change their policy according to the situation, because we are talking of the survival of the fittest. Okay, how we can survive in the anarchic system. Then when we are talking of I'm talking of the realist now, realist theory or neo-realist in combined. So this has been the dominant perspective among the scholars as well as the practitioners of the IR, especially in South Asia. And the Pakistan's application of balance of power to contain India through alignment previously with the America and China at different times, and the acquisition of weaponry and an overtly aggressive strategy has been successful somehow but in the present time Pakistan is facing a challenge from India. But it is not help, but this thing doesn't help the socio-economic development of the Pakistan, the economy of the Pakistan. So the presently same is the case of India to counter China strategically and militarily to align with the West, especially the US-led alliance. So this has been the case in the point. When we are talking of the liberalism, this theory is driven by the mechanism, like we can include economic interdependence, we can include the multilateral institutions, and we can also include the democratic peace in this. So in this theoretical context, South Asia has not been able to achieve sustainable peace because of the hybrid regime. And now what is hybrid regime? Hybrid regime combines autocratic features with the democratic ones. So it combines autocracy and democratic ones. And they can simultaneously hold political repressions and regular elections. Also, you can take the example of the Pakistan, for instance. It's seen in the many South Asian countries, not only the Pakistan, but the weak institutions, lack of leadership, and merged economic integration has been seen as the root cause of the turbulence in the region. Now, when we are talking of the constructivism, the theory is concerned with how ideas, norms, and values define international structure. That bad norms such as intervention, stress on territorial expansion has been the major hindrances to achieve the everlasting peace in South Asia. So now India's posture, now in the present time, when we are talking of the contemporary time, India's posture as a is changing. India is showing its posture as a hard power in the recent times. That I am giving example here, the unofficial sanctions on Nepal with reference to its new constitution. India's military forces. A second example is India's military forces crossed the Myanmar border in June 2015 to attack some Naga insurgents, and cross-border raids in Pakistan after Pulwama. So India's active resistance in Dokalam, India's denial to join BRI, removal of Article 370 and non-engagement, and the policy to isolate Pakistan at the global level, and India's engagement with the Western Bloc to counter China. And recently I am giving the example of this Kala Pani dispute within India and Nepal, and this India-China border standoff in the present time, that war clouds are on, that some strategists are saying that some kind of the war preparations are going on, but it is highly unlikely in my point of view. So these things, India is also not showing any kind of the defiance. India is actively tackling these kind of the problems or the crisis, and showing a posture of a hard power here. So now since China is very much involved in South Asia, so let's talk about the China advantage here, because if we are not going to understand the background of the challenges, then we are not going to have the prospect of the peace. So China's advantage is what? Despite their border and territorial dispute with India since 60s, then their two-way trade relationship is now worth $90 billion. But trade, you can see here the trade economic perspective. You can see here the trade is $90 billion, although the balance is very much in China's favor, which India would like to see remedied. Now the China establishing its own regional organizations and initiatives also, including all South Asian nations, most of the South Asian nations, like which one of the big chances in South Asian region being a desire of India, Pakistan to be involved in the Chinese-led organizations, as I am giving the example of the BRICS here. For instance, in BRICS, both India and Pakistan are there, despite having difference, despite SARC was failed due to the Indo-Pak hostility, but in the BRICS, they are combined. Both are the members in the BRICS. BRICS comprises Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And significantly, this brings China, India and Russia together in a way that may have once caused the US strategic anxiety, because US having problem with this kind of the alliance. Then you can take the example of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, that has seen China gain significant influence in the Central Asia through SCO. So, and India and Pakistan both are the members of SCO also. So you can see the difference here. The one regional organization failed due to the hostility between the two South Asian nations, but on the other hand, the Chinese-led regional organizations both are the members. So here you can see the difference. So the Asian, now I am also mention here the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, led by China, which 57 prospective founding members, including 6 from South Asia. Those are Bangladesh, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. And US is not the member to it, although many of its allies like Australia, Philippines, Thailand, and UK are the member of this Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And but the impact of the AIIB is yet to be seen, but they are the member of these organizations. Now you people must have known about the string of pearls. So China's string of pearls strategy to ingratiate itself throughout the Indian Ocean. China has obtained or seek to obtain maritime access to the military assets in strategic locations, including Chittagong in Bangladesh, in Maldives, Marau Atoll, in Myanmar, Sittwe, in Pakistan, Gwadar, and Sri Lanka, Hambantota. So these are the ports that China has fully controlled around in South Asia. So similarly, China is offering neighboring Bhutan and Nepal trade and transport opportunities. Some loans they are providing soft loans, with one possibility being the extension of there is a railway line from Kingai Xinjiang to Shigaste. It's the south of Lhasa to Kathmandu. This would help Nepal to diversify its import, particularly of the oil, and to lessen its almost total dependency on India. Because of the landlocked nature, Nepal is totally dependent on India, but through this rail route, Nepal's dependence will be lower on India. So these Chinese moves are threat to the India's strategic interest. Now, what are the India's counter initiative? So India is also getting closer to the nations or entities near China, particularly Japan, Vietnam, Taiwan, and Philippines. So India is also having a good relationship with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, which India is a dialogue partner also. And it also involved in the two regional initiatives, the Bay of Bengal initiative for the multi-sectoral technical and economic cooperation, we call it WIMSTEC, and which involves Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Myanmar, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Thailand, but not Pakistan. And second one is the Ganga Mekong cooperation with Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. So these are some of the things that I put before you, that how China is involving South Asian nations in their particular regional organizations, and how India is responding to that. So now the question, this is a lot of the things we are talking when we are talking of the distrust or the hostility between India and Pakistan. Then one question comes that religion plays a very important role, but this thing I don't find any that substance in this thing. The question arises: is divergence of religion and civilization a hindrance to achieve lasting peace in South Asia? I say no. Why? Because divergence of civilization and religious practices are as not being an argument for not achieving peace in South Asia. If same is the case in the point India and Afghanistan has a good relationship, we can take the example of the Bangladesh and Maldives with India also. Despite Hindu religion, India and Nepal had bitter relationship time and again. So religion is not a case in point. And discontentment and mistrust with the other South Asian nations arise out of a perception of Indian domination and interference, because these smaller nations, they think that India want to dominate on them. India want to interfere in their affairs. So this is also a kind of perception among the smaller nations of the region. For instance, perceived meddling in the internal affairs of the Nepal by India has often led to the negative responses from the Nepalese civil society. Then Indian establishment need to be accommodative here and flexible to deal with the neighboring countries. The open talks and dialogues are the better alternative to achieve the lasting peace. So what is the way out? So here I will suggest some divergence of civilization and religious practices as not being an argument for not achieving peace in South Asia. Second, that since we are facing now a COVID-19 situation, whole world is facing, our region is also facing. So the latest South Asian economic focus now estimate that regional growth will fall to a range between 1.8 and 2.8% in 2020. And it was previously expected in 2019 like 6.3% growth 6 months ago, but now it is between 1.8 to 2.8. So in the worst case, the entire region may experience a negative growth in this year or the coming year, because before COVID-19 we all know that Bangladesh was the top performer with 8.2% GDP, followed by the Nepal and India with 7.1 and 6.1. So it is a high time for the South Asian nation to solve their disputes amicably and work for the peace and prosperity of the region. So the recommendations for the peace here can be sustainable economic development, constructive diplomacy, mutual trust and agreements, and economic interdependence, and non-interference in the affairs of the others, because the security environment of the South Asia is so complex. In this complex security environment, where the presence of the three nuclear powers, because China is very much into the confrontation and competition with India with regard to the Asian powers. Then Pakistan also want to balance against India. That's why Pakistan just like a puppet of China in the present time, because They are saying that their relationship is the stronger than Himalaya. So these kind of the phrases we are hearing in the present time. And India's security situation or the regional relationship, if we are seeing in the present time, are not so welcoming, since India's relationship with the Nepal, Bangladesh on the issue of the Rohingyas, there was some kind of diplomatic or kind of the political exchange with reference to the Rohingya problems, because Bangladesh recently said that what amount of the Rohingya you have in India, you just send them to Bangladesh. We are having a top GDP in South Asia. So this kind of the perception emerging in South Asian nations. We can take the example of the Nepal in the present time, the Coordinate Treaty signed of that time. Now, when India introduced the new map, when describing their Jammu and Kashmir as a union territories and Ladakh, then they are also showing this disputed issue of the Nepal in that map. So this is also a problem. With Kashmir, with Pakistan, India is having a problem. So India has to win the confidence of these smaller nations. Before, India was having a very good relationship. We are, all nations like smaller nations like Bhutan, Nepal, they are having friendship treaty with India. Nepalese are having the same privileges as a right like Indian citizens in India. So these kind of the things. Now, what kind of the problems that coming, that these nations are going away, and China is fully encircle India through the string of pearls, or the engaging South Asian nation into the different regional groups, and they have through the soft power or soft power diplomacy. But on the other hand, now India's posture is seeing as a hard power in the recent times. So India has to change its strategy, because it was very much there in India's interest to show this kind of the resistance, but not to the smaller nations of the South Asia. Though these are some issues with the China in terms of the border, so they so at that level it is okay. But when the issue is coming to the other South Asian nations where we are having very good relationship, if the issue is coming to the distrust to those countries, that is not a welcoming sign for India. So the question here is that the more external intervention in the affairs of the South Asia, or this kind of the territorial disputes, these are the we can call it economic interdependence. That is very important point here, because if we are seeing the trade between the South Asian nations, it is not like that. I mentioned it's only 2%, and we are going to compare with the ASEAN, they are 20% higher than that. So here India need to focus on that. If South Asian nations, they are economically interdependent, we can take the example of the EU, for instance, because there was so much difference in the wars between the EU nations, but despite that, they formed the EU, and it was one of the most successful organizations. But here, because of the Western footprint earlier, before it was by British colonialism, then it was taken over by the America. So the nation of the South Asia, they didn't come up from those clutches until now. They are under those clutches, because we have seen the policy of the US in the recent time, how they use nations and how they throw the nations, how they use narratives. First they fought with the Taliban, then they say good Taliban, bad Taliban. Then first they took the support of the Pakistan. Then when they wanted to exit from Afghanistan, there is no need of the Pakistan. And Pakistan's economy, you can see the economic condition of the Pakistan in the present time. So the nation like Pakistan, they must understand how these Western nations are using against each other, because they use, then they throw them. So they need to reconcile their issues, their problems, and amicably they can solve it. It's not a big problem, because at two instances, for instance, the Kashmir problem during the Nawaz Sharif and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, they were very much close. Then Musharraf in Agra, he was very much close to come out with some peaceful agenda in terms of the Kashmir. So these things can be manageable. But from these small conflicts, these Western nations or the other nations in the region, they are taking advantage, and South Asian nations are not at peace. They should think about their development, because the region is also facing the strong problem of the poverty, unemployment, and malnutrition, environmental problem. So these issues are not being discussed, because the security issues are the paramount to those nations. That's why these issues are on the backdrop. So we need to consider in these issues, if we are going to have this kind of the accommodative approach, or the kind of the amicable approach, then the nations of the South Asia can be prosper. With this regard, I am ending my lecture here, and I am opening the space for question and answers. Thank you very much for patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Aslam Khan, for your lecture. I think